good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second day of the Policy Conference. And at the very start, I want to say, well done for being here at 9 o'clock. That in itself is quite an achievement. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that anyone is the slightest bit hungover, but if you were, I mean, what could be a better way of sobering up than motions on school funding? I tell you that. But before we do that, I just want to share with you, I had a dream last night. I believe, as your national president, to be completely open with my members, I dreamt that I was standing at the bar, and this beautiful lady came up to me. She looked at the medallion I was wearing, and she said, "Excuse me, sir, you're not wearing that medallion properly." She proceeded to come straight in front of me. She put her arms around my neck. She gazed into my eyes. She sort of fiddled with the back of my neck for about 30 seconds, and then she gently withdrew her arms, and I went, "Thank you, Amanda." I woke up at about 3 in the morning in a cold sweat, realised it wasn't a dream, it actually happened. I got up close and personal with the chief inspector. She'd obviously seen the presidential chain of office. She has a bit of an eye for jewellery and realised I hadn't put it on properly. I mean, I think she had assessed it as a serious weakness or inadequate the way I was working. But with her personal help and support, I ended up wearing that medallion in an outstanding way. So, Amanda, if you are watching, thank you so much. And please be kind when you inspect my school. Okay. So, here we are then. Welcome back, everyone. We're going straight into the motions. Just a few reminders. If you're proposing a motion, you have 5 minutes. We have the 2-minute mics. We do encourage debate either for or against. If you do come up to one of the 2-minute mics, please don't forget to give your name and your branch. And this session is scheduled to end at 11 o'clock. Just one notice. At the end of this session, could the 3 people who are asking questions of the Secretary of State please meet for a short meeting in the Westminster Suite, which I believe is out there and on the right, at 11 o'clock promptly. So before you go to coffee or the exhibition, the 3 people please meet with myself and Magnus. So we're going to start with lead motion 10A funding, and there are also 2 lettered motions there as well. It's standing in the name of the Walsall branch and the Eastern region. It's on page 38 of your brochure, and the proposer, Michelle Sheehy, seconder, Alan Garnett. Michelle, welcome.
Morning, conference. I hope everybody's not too bleary-eyed, and we'll try and make it as short as possible. Several years ago, the thought that I could inform the voting public of the implications of the real-term cuts to our funding, coupled with the promise of a bacon sandwich on the train, saw me at Broadcasting House waiting to be interviewed on live television. I was clutching notes, reminding me of all the points I needed to make, how our funding was being eroded by schools having to meet past pension costs, the apprenticeship levy, unfunded pay awards, inflation, and so on. I was joined by a parent with similar concerns. We were given a couple of minutes to make our points. After this, the presenter said, "However, a government spokesperson said that more funding is going into schools than ever before." So that was it. They moved on to a different subject. We were totally shut down. All our arguments were trumped by that line. Today, they have an even better catchphrase, record funding. The Institute for Fiscal Studies claims that there has been a 9% real terms fall in school spending per pupil in the decade between 2009 and 2019, representing the largest cut in school spending in over 40 years. Can this be true despite schools receiving record funding? When I was at school, my maths teacher, when trying to explain equations to a class of 11-year-olds, used to say, "Plus is what I have, minus is what I owe, and I pay my debts." Well, on the plus side, we have record funding. Unfortunately, on the minus side, we have record spending. Spending on essential services that used to be provided for free by our local authorities. Our lack of adequate SEND funding means that this must be heavily supplemented by the rest of our school budget. So we are left with choices. What do we cut? Shall we get rid of our speech and language support, which is needed more and more by every new intake? Shall we get rid of our play therapist, who has done outstanding work with some of our SEND children? Shall we stop ensuring that all our children can swim, despite the fact that we back onto a canal? How long shall we leave it before we refurbish our dilapidated infant toilets? My school staff are expensive. Their experience and expertise mean that the children at our school have the best possible provision. Do I think they're worth the cost? Yes, every penny. In what other profession is there a worry that staff are too experienced? Do they deserve a pay rise? Well, in view of the extra hours they put in, yes, they absolutely do. Do I know how I would fund such a pay rise? No, I have no idea. I did begin to wonder if it was just our school that was unable to make ends meet, so I asked the other heads at our primary forum what the situation was in their school. All of them were in a deficit budget in the third year. I wonder, is that because all of the heads are incapable of managing their school budgets, or is it because there simply isn't enough funding in the system? Education funding for those aged 2 to 19 needs an additional 7.3 billion in revenue funding and 2.8 billion in capital funding a year to restore funding to 2015 levels. So back to my maths teacher. Plus is what I have, minus is what I owe. But unfortunately now I can't balance the equation. The essential record spending is greater than the record funding. The minuses outweigh the pluses. We need to speak up for the children in our schools. I move.
Conference, it's a privilege to stand before you all this morning and an honour to follow Michelle onto the platform to second this motion. I'll say it now. We do not expect to lose this vote. But passing the motion is just the beginning. It has to be just the beginning. Across the country, hearts and minds for fair funding were won a long time ago, everywhere apart from in our government. And how can we get our voice heard when this incompetent government is always facing a headline-hogging crisis? I'm afraid relentlessly reasonable will not work. We need a campaign with leverage that will make the people who need to listen but don't want to listen have to listen. Let's start with the obvious but totally overlooked question. What is the true cost of a good education or even an outstanding education? Let us all set budgets that represent the true cost of running our schools. We would love every school to draft such a budget before Christmas. I was going to call it an aspirational budget. That would suggest extravagance. No, I'm talking about a meeting everybody's needs budget, a budget that can meet the demands and expectations placed on us by government, employers, parents, and one that the children deserve. A budget that can pay the wage bill, including all its on-costs, without cutting provision. A budget that can meet our own expectations. Setting our budget before Christmas gives us time to lobby and campaign hard to make change happen. Of course, actually setting and meeting the pupils' needs budget would mean most schools would be setting a deficit budget. Paul said yesterday, 1 in 4 are going to do that anyway. So let's do it. Imagine the power of that message and the power we would all feel with that collective action. That would be a campaign with teeth, a campaign that would get the attention the scandal of year-on-year underfunding deserves. And for the first time, we really would have a national picture of the true cost of running schools. The government would be forced to act. Would it bail us out like the banks were in the past? Or better still, will the government redress the systemic underfunding and enable schools to level up and really build back a better future for the children? I urge our executive to build a coalition of parents, governors, teaching unions and the TUC to lead a campaign with teeth to get fair funding for schools. Thank you.
Now, before we open up for any questions or comments, we have 2 lettered motions. The first one is 10B, review of funding in Wales. It's optional, but does the proposer, Dean, or the seconder, Tim? Yes, Dean, you're coming up to speak. Thank you. Yes, lettered motion 10B.
Good morning, Conference. I support this motion, not only your concerns in England, as are our concerns in Wales also. And we call upon National Executive to support the Welsh Exec in challenging Welsh Government to ensure transparency and open formula for all local authorities across Wales, and also to look at the well-meaning, sometimes motivated grants that come into the system that are not fit for purpose, that come with it a huge amount of bureaucracy. but also in Wales, the three-level tier of consortia, local authorities and Welsh Government. We want money to go direct to schools. I support this motion, and I support it fully.
And then we also have lettered motion 10C, pupil premium funding. It's optional, but either does Rachel or Andy, do either of you wish to propose or second? Okay. In that case, coming back to the lead motion 10A funding, do we have any speakers at mic 1 or mic 2? Thank you, Dave.
Dave Woods, London Region and Ealing Branch. I strongly support this motion because the key word for me in reading it was funding needs to be sufficient. It needs to be sufficient to meet the needs of all pupils. My own school's a two-form entry mainstream school with a 28-place ASD unit. And yet year after year at Schools Forum, I'm forced to vote for this insidious 0.5% transfer that steals money and steals provision from non-SEND pupils to prop up our broken, inadequately funded SEND provision. That is not fair. It's not fair for the SEND pupils who don't have the money in the first place, and it's not fair for the mainstream pupils who have their own educational provision reduced because there is not sufficient funding. We hear repeatedly about levelling up. I would bet that we will hear the phrase levelling up at some point today when we have a visitor, although no one in this government seems to know what levelling up actually means. So for us, we should tell them what levelling up is. It's putting enough money into the system so every single pupil is funded fairly for every part of educational provision. Please, colleagues, support this motion unanimously.
I see nobody else wishing to speak or comment, in which case we will move to the vote. So for the first time this morning, can I ask for those in favour to please show clearly? Thank you. Thank you very much. And for those against? And I'm delighted to say that is unanimously carried. Thank you. Just for information, we have had one emergency motion, and that is connected to teachers' pay and conditions. It's been proposed by the West Midlands region. We will be taking that today as motion 39. So at the end of the day, there will be one additional motion reference teachers' pay and conditions. Moving on now to motion number 11. That's to do with maintained nursery schools. It's standing in the name of the Bristol branch. It's the top of page 39 of your brochure. The proposer, Simon Holmes, seconder, Denise Draper. Good morning, Simon.
Morning. My name is Simon Holmes. I'm the head teacher at St Philip's Marsh Nursery School and Cashmore Early Years Centre in Bristol. Our nursery school is located in the area with the highest rate of multiple deprivation, according to the Idachi Index in the city, and amongst the top 3% areas of deprivation in the country. Unlike our colleagues in the private and voluntary daycare business, nursery schools are classed by the Department of Education as schools and are legally required to be led by a head teacher and employ qualified teachers. This is a good thing, because the most disadvantaged children in our communities deserve the best quality education. Nursery schools are a key to social mobility, and I hate to use the word levelling up, but for my mind, social mobility is about levelling up. I'm delighted that the Right Honourable Nadhim Zawari is coming to talk to us today, because he addressed the all-party parliamentary group on nursery schools back in 2019, and I would like to quote exactly what he said as reported in Hansard at the time, in reply to Lucy Powell, who was chairing the all-party group at the time. Mr. Zawari says, she will know that I absolutely understand and support the role of maintained nursery schools in giving some of our most disadvantaged children the best possible start in life. It has been heartening to hear the overwhelming support today for these wonderful institutions, which in many cases have been working at the heart of their community for decades, certainly well before this rookie MP and minister got to this place. I also want to thank the Honourable Lady for her work in leading the all-party group that has done so much to raise the profile of maintained nursery schools and the challenges they face. I am pleased that we are having this debate today. This government's ambition is to provide equality of opportunity for every child, regardless of background or where they live. High-quality early education is the cornerstone of social mobility, and the evidence shows that it particularly benefits the most disadvantaged. Thank you, the Right Honourable Nadine Zawari. You are not now the rookie MP, you are in charge. You have the power to live up to your words. In case you are not aware, nursery schools are inspected in exactly the same way as primary schools under Section 5 inspections. However, we are not funded as schools, and the Maintained Nursery School Supplement, which was introduced as a temporary measure in 2018, pending a review of funding, which we are still waiting for, is insufficient to meet the additional costs we face. There are 12 maintained nursery schools in Bristol, 11 of them are now in deficit. They are nearly all located in areas of high deprivation, and the deficits are completely unrecoverable under the current funding system. Whilst I'm speaking from a Bristol perspective, I know this is the case nationally. All maintained nursery schools are now under threat of closure unless there is a new funding formula which addresses the additional costs nursery schools face and acknowledge their wider role in early intervention, safeguarding, health and welfare. To quote again from the House of Commons Cross-Party Education Committee on Tackling Disadvantage in the Early Years from February 2019. Maintained nursery schools are extremely successful in ensuring excellent outcomes for disadvantaged children. Maintained nursery schools cannot wait until the spending review. Funding decisions regarding staff and places for the next academic year are being made now. They must be supported to ensure that disadvantaged children are given the best possible start to life. If ever, the hidden value of nursery schools has been more evident in the work they do at the heart of their communities. It has been over the past 18 months of pandemic and lockdown. We were often the only settings open in our neighbourhoods to provide face-to-face contact, support and advice for vulnerable children and families under stress, whilst other services, such as health visitors, family support workers and social care, were unavailable. The future of these precious institutions, rooted for many decades in our communities, in the case of my school since 1926, are now on the edge of a precipice. This can no longer be kicked down the road. There is nothing more important than our children and their future. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. We now have Judy Shaw wishing to speak at mic 2.
Thank you. Good morning. Judy Shaw, Chair of the Early Years Sector Council. Colleagues, I want to give the full support of the Early Years Sector Council to this motion and to our colleagues like Simon and Denise who are leading the maintained nursery schools. This group of leaders have consistently gone the extra mile to deliver key government policies for our youngest children, often in the most deprived areas. Supplementary funding was a stopgap measure, and it's unacceptable for the government to take over 5 years to provide a long-lasting, sustainable solution. The risk to further closures of these jewels is great. These leaders need the continued and strong and vocal support of this family. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't don't have anybody else wishing to speak, so let us move to the vote. Can I ask for those in favour to please show? Thank you very much. And for those against, please show. And that, once again, is unanimously carried. Thank you. Okay, we now move to motion number 12. This is to do with high needs funding. It's standing in the name of the SEND Sector Council. It's on page 39 of your booklet. The proposer, Marika Mars, seconder, Bernadette.
President Conference, I don't want to duplicate points that have been made earlier, and I've been deleting things as fast as I can on my iPad, but it does get a bit carried away, and if you press too hard, you lose everything. There are lots of things I'm prepared to share with all of you, but not the first-time experience of having literally nothing to say. So I want to just highlight a couple of truths for you about SEND funding. The system of high needs funding is a complicated mess that few people truly understand. The leaders of schools are having to make unbearably difficult decisions and to find ways of supporting their children and families with inadequate funding. Parents continue to highlight the inadequacies of SEND funding for their children. The local authorities are trying to fund increasing caseloads without the necessary funding, and they're plunging deeper into deficit year on year. Governors of schools are being forced to make efficiency savings, knowing they can ill afford to do so. And the current funding system for high needs is based on what the government is prepared to spend, not on what needs to be spent to meet legal entitlements. And the government continues to try to deny chronic under-resourcing with variations on the theme of "you've never had it so good." The question is, who do you trust? Who do you believe? The Education Policy Unit says, over the last few years, there's been a war of words between the school sector and both ministers and officials in the Department for Education. The former often claim that schools are at breaking point, while the latter maintains that though funding is tight and schools will need to continue to make efficiency savings, they are nevertheless better funded than ever before. Who do you believe? Media coverage over the last couple of years continues to paint a picture of a service in crisis, with a rising number of appeals from parents who are struggling to get access to the services they need, and a reported increase in elective home education due to the lack of appropriate provision for children with SEND. Funding pressures on mainstream schools as a result of inflation, increased teachers' pay and higher pension contributions for support staff mean that many can't provide the extra support for complex needs which our children are entitled to. By even the most heartless standards, this is a demonstrably false economy against long-term physical and mental health and, of course, productivity. But far more importantly than that, it's a direct assault on the dignity of our most vulnerable children and a betrayal of the fundamental British values of inclusion, equality and compassion. By pursuing an EHC plan, schools receive further funding from councils, but they must meet the first £6,000 of any additional support required from a notional budget, leaving increasing numbers of pupils without the help that they need. It doesn't take many pupils with SEND to push schools to an annual deficit starting position due to this. Funding has stagnated and local authorities have massively overspent in their allocated budgets. Perhaps heads and governors should start talking about a notional deficit if this is the financial unicorn it seems to be when it suits other people. It doesn't matter how many different ways you cut the cake or reformulate or reallocate, the quantum is simply insufficient to keep up with demand, leaving many local authorities unable to meet their statutory duties and meaning that children with high needs and disabilities miss out on what they deserve from a mainstream education. We will never have a needs-led system if we don't know what we need and we don't seek to provide that rather than what's considered affordable. We simply cannot afford to do otherwise. So today, we'd just like your support for this motion to send a message to the government: no more. No more postcode lotteries for children with additional needs and their families. No more false dawns with headline-grabbing sound bites. No more deaf ears to the professionals and families that know firsthand what a crisis this is. No more inappropriate proxies for need. No more excuses. Give our children what they need and what they deserve. Conference, I move.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marika. I don't think we have anybody wishing to speak, in which case we will move straight to the vote. Can I ask for those in favour to please show? Thank you very much. And for those against? And it is unanimously carried. Thank you. Moving on then to motion 13. This is the best start for life report. It's standing in the name of the Early Years Sector Council and the proposer, Judy Shaw, seconder, Simon Kidwell. Thank you, Judy.
Morning again, everybody. Behind all the distracting, eye-popping headlines this year, Early Years is actually having a bit of a moment. I'm going to drop some really impressive names now. I've got HRHs and I've got Right Honourables and Dames and Sirs. In June 2021, the Duchess of Cambridge launched the Royal Foundation Centre for Early Childhood to drive awareness of the extraordinary impact of the early years. A quote from their report, State of the Nation, Understanding Public Attitudes to the Early Years. Our future will be shaped by what we do today. Science tells us that a child's experiences from conception through their first 5 years will go on to shape their next 50. It tells us that the kind of children we raise today will reflect the kind of world we'll live in tomorrow. And it tells us that investing in the start of life is not indulgence, but economically, socially and psychologically vital to a prosperous society. And action is what we need. And I'm going to doff my cap, if I had one on, to the Royals there. I couldn't have put it better. In March 2021, Sir Kevin Collins placed early years at the heart of recovery. He said, "Early years must be central. I see it as core to my work, not overloading it with programmes, but creating the time and the space for children to be with highly trained and skilled adults. This sector has been subject to consistent underinvestment." Thank you, Kevin, and we wish you were still there. Also in March, the government released their commitment to the early years in the report The Best Start for Life, a vision for the 1001 critical days. Chair of the review, Dame Andrea Leadsom, writes, "We spend billions on challenges in society, from lack of school readiness to bullying to poor mental health to addiction and criminality, and further billions on conditions such as obesity, diabetes and congenital heart disease. Yet," she says, "the building blocks for lifelong emotional and physical health are laid down in the first 1001 days, and we don't give this critical period the focus it deserves." So I added this week because Nadeem Zahawi, in his conference speech, he said, "We'll make this the best country in the world to train and learn as a teacher. And that means investing in our outstanding early years staff too." I feel he added that bit on, but never mind. He said 40% of education inequality is, curious choice of words, baked in by the age of 5. He's right, but it's a funny word, isn't it? I wondered if he's seen the soggy bottoms in the nursery, but I added that on. So I'm going to go back to it. They've made some important pledges in this report in key areas. Seamless support for families, welcoming hubs for families, the information families need when they need it, an empowered start for life workforce, and the final area, leadership for change, ensuring local and national accountability. So, colleagues, you can dare to dream a little bit here, and I could drift away on the promises therein. So listen to this. Multidisciplinary support for families, continuity of care, swift assessment and response, highly skilled workforce, high levels of well-being for parents, and children have a chance to thrive. That's before they get to school. And then you've got schools that are not having to plug all the gaps that the current absences of these services causes. What a start we could give them. We could do our jobs. So it can't just be a dream or a vision. It's vital that it happens, and it happens fast. No more hot air, no more rhetoric, no more empty promises, and no more sticking plasters. A strong, supportive, early years policy framework, well-funded and well-resourced. Support the motion and we'll be snapping at the government's heels, holding them to account and making sure they deliver. Action for children, for families, for our schools and for our communities. Their future is our future. Mr. President and Conference, I move.
Thank you very much indeed, Judy. Okay, I think we are just checking. I think we can go straight to the vote then. Can I ask for those in favour to please show? Thank you. And for those against? And it is unanimously carried. Thank you. Moving on then, please, to motion number 14. This is the National Funding Formula. It's standing in the name of the Professional Committee. We welcome back Marika to propose. Seconder will be Paul Gosling. And this is on the bottom of page 39. Thank you, Marika.
Hello again. I promise I'll sit down after this. This is quite a technical motion around the national funding formula, so just to sort of hone our thinking, it's rather than the quantum and the inadequacy of funding, this is really just to get into the weeds around the way funding formulas work. So for many years, all of our members have highlighted the inherent unfairness of the funding system, where we know that pupils in different parts of the country attract very different levels of funding, and that's just simply because of the postcode where they live. And therefore, the NAHT has supported the basic principle of a fair national funding formula, and one that's based on a transparent assessment of both pupil and school needs. The problem is that the political and educational landscape has changed quite a bit since we began to talk about such a formula, and the government's now moving to what they're calling a harder version of the funding formula, which gives almost no local flexibility. And so it's important that we as an association make sure that our position reflects those changes and the new reality. Conference, we're also concerned that government is attempting to use funding mechanisms as a tool to drive through other policy objectives through the back door, and we can't allow this to go unchecked. The decisions about school structures and the school system are vitally important, and they should be subject to their own separate public conversations and consultation, and not carried through by stealth under the cover of what on the surface might appear to be technical changes to the way that our schools are funded. What we're seeking to do through this motion is to reaffirm that even if the bulk of school funding is to go directly to schools, there'll still need to be a degree of local flexibility and local coordination when it comes to the provision of the education in any given area. And that's why we're asking Conference to update and refine our policy position to make it clear that even if the funding formula is going to be hardened, then there'll need still to be a democratically accountable body in each area to maintain a full strategic overview for the delivery of education services. And furthermore, that schools of all types will still need to collaborate to meet the needs of all pupils in their local area, because the risk with the funding formula that goes to individual schools is siloing of funds. We know that the quality of local authorities undoubtedly varies across the country, and trust me when I say I don't always see eye to eye with my own, but they do still serve a number of vital roles, including the key role when it comes to provision and coordination of SEND services, for example. The motion also reaffirms a fundamental principle that a national funding formula will only be truly fair if the schools actually receive and get to keep the funding they're entitled to. We are concerned that the freedoms to move money between schools within a trust could be used by the government to mask the overall inadequacy of school funding, and also that at a more basic level it could lead to some individual schools receiving less than they're entitled to. Conference, this motion will allow the NAHT to continue to campaign for a truly fair funding formula, whilst also protecting our members and ensuring that schools remain firmly grounded within their local communities. Conference, I move.
Thank you very much, Marika. Again, I see nobody wishing to speak, so we'll move straight to the vote. Can I ask for those in favour to please show? Thank you. And for those against to please show. Once again, unanimously carried. Thank you. Right, moving on now to motion number 15. This is violence and aggression against school staff.
Good morning, everybody.
It's going to be proposed by Claire Evans. Thank you, Magnus. And this comes from the Deputy and Assistant Heads School Council. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you. So it's 9:40, and I only just found out I was doing this motion at 9:15. So I don't have a fancy PowerPoint or an acrostic poem or a necessarily inspiring speech. However, reading the motion about the need for a conference to do something about violence and aggression against school staff, I also believe this is just a fundamental human right that all of us should have. However, it has been a motion since 2019. One of the points being, produce posters for display. Becky from Twinkle can knock one of these up in 24 hours, so I don't get how it can be so hard. So I urge you to show support for me to get me off the podium, and at the 2-minute mic, so conference, I move.
Thank you very much, Claire, and very well done for standing in at such short notice. Tremendous. Does anyone, we have a speaker at mic number 2. Thank you.
Morning Conference, Jim Nicholson, Stockport Branch. In support of this motion, Stockport Council worked with head teachers across Stockport a number of years ago and created a respect agenda, a respect policy, because we were experiencing so many of our heads and school staff being subject to abuse on a daily basis, and abuse comes in so many ways. We have to stop this. So many other agencies actually have policing to support them. Our colleagues, frontline services, stand every day and suffer abuse from all sorts of quarters. Conference, support this motion.
Thank you. Okay, if no one else wishes to speak, let us move to the vote. If you are in favour, please will you show. Thank you. And if you are against the motion, please indicate. Thank you. Once again, the motion is unanimously carried. Thank you. Okay. We're now on to motion number 16. This is School Emergency Lockdown Procedures and Policy. It's standing in the name of the West Sussex branch and the Brighton and Hove branch. It's on the middle of page 40 in your brochure. The proposer is James Field, seconder Hildy Mitchell. Thank you, James.
Good morning, Conference. The parts I promised to add to my speech, I've actually taken out. It was promised last night, and I've reverted back to the original speech. But my name's James Field. I'm the head of St Richard's Catholic Primary in Chichester. I'm a member of the West Sussex branch and South East National Executive member. This is quite a specific motion, and as some people pointed out to me last night, quite dull. But it's a very important... But it's a very important motion, and it's something I think we should proceed with. Conference, on Friday the 28th of May this year at 2:30 p.m, just as we were getting ready to send the children off home for half-term, we received a phone call from the police instructing us to lock down the school as there was a gunman in the area. Fortunately, we had invested in an emergency lockdown alarm and had practiced the lockdown procedure just 3 weeks before. So the children were all calm and followed the procedure carefully. Reception children enjoyed having 13 stories read to them and finishing off all the raisins in the fruit basket. And it went as well as could be under the circumstances. There were many things we felt we could have improved, and we were not prepared for such a long lockdown, 45 minutes in total. On the whole, though, our procedure and the practice session helped us to stay safe and lock down quickly. We are incredibly grateful to the police service, particularly PC Serapak, who was at the school gates within minutes and was asking parents waiting for their children to disperse. We also coincidentally had off-duty police officer Steve Morgan, one of the parents at school. He was in the office at the time picking up his young daughter. So we're incredibly grateful to them. And I just wanted to take a minute to say how lucky we are as a country to have such brave women and men in the police service who on a daily basis run towards danger unarmed. There was also a similar incident in West Sussex at Crawley College on the 26th of April, where armed police were called to apprehend a gunman on the campus. Both these incidents and my investigation into procedures in the South East and nationally have highlighted frightening inadequacies in our system. Firstly, as to how educational settings and settings where there's children are alerted to such dangers, but also which settings are informed, and also how emergency services and local authorities work with the schools and settings for the safety of our children. As a school, we were informed of the gunman from a police officer ringing the school via his mobile phone using the main school number. The schools chosen to be alerted were done to the best of the police officer's knowledge. However, rather worryingly, the nursery school next door wasn't informed, and another nursery setting on our road also wasn't informed. In Crawley College as well, armed police needed floor plans as they thought there might be another attacker on campus. These were only available via the computers in the campus. The Crawley College acted outstandingly, but nationally we need to do a lot more. I feel strongly that there needs to be a nationally agreed procedure to quickly and efficiently alert schools in an emergency of any dangers. We have the technology in our schools through things like Parent Mail to text all our parents about emergency lockdowns. So perhaps we need to look at something similar for the police emergency services to contact school leaders. We have learned over the last year and a half that we don't know what crises and threats face us as schools in the coming years. Terrorism, crime, natural disasters, and threats caused by environmental change are all possibilities, and we need to urgently have a better system of alerting not only schools, but educational facilities. I'm sure that many of you working in local authorities will have good examples of good practice. However, I'm sure you agree with me that local authorities and the underfunded schools and local authorities are not best placed to sort this issue, and it needs to be addressed on a national stage. And I think we're uniquely placed as the NHT to be the ones to lead on this. So conference, we're not, just to reiterate, I have complete admiration for our police service and the men and women who serve our communities. And we're not telling the police how they should achieve this particular outcome. However, I'm asking you to vote in favour of this motion and support us in working with the National Police Chiefs Council and other emergency services nationally to improve our systems of emergency lockdown. Conference, I move.
Thank you, James. I disagree. That wasn't a boring motion at all, James. But I'm fascinated to know what bits you took out. Maybe you could share those with me in the bar later. Right. Okay. Does anyone wish to actually say the bits that James took out, maybe? Come up and do that at the 2-minute mic? No? In which case, then, let's proceed to the vote. Those in favour, please raise a hand. Thank you very much. Those against, please show. Once again, unanimously carried. Thank you, James. We're moving now on to motion number 17. This deals with children missing in education. It's standing in the name of the Staffordshire branch. It's on the bottom of page 40 of your booklet. The proposer, Emily Prophet, seconder, Stephen Breeze. Welcome, Emily.
Good morning. I'm going to read you a few case studies, quite sad case studies. Case 1. Our school has a women's refuge in catchment. We have a dedicated family support worker, who we employ, who has a good working relationship with the refuge and all support services in Stafford. The family failed to send the children to school at the start of lockdown. We already had concerns and had started to involve other agencies. The family did not respond to the school's request for information, and we could not contact them. They were reported missing in education to Staffordshire County Council. When we chased this up some weeks later, we were told that the case had been closed. We asked where the family was, and we were told they'd moved to Wolverhampton. We contacted and continued to chase this, and Wolverhampton refused the case because the family were known to be in Birmingham. This contravenes the local arrangements, but nobody was there to oversee it. Birmingham refused this case because the family were not in the permanent address. This is also a contravention of the local arrangements, which state you do not need a permanent address. We contact the Children's Commission for advice. They follow it up with Birmingham, who then tried to contact the family. The family had moved to Northampton. We contacted Northampton, who assigned a local social worker. We heard no more for a couple of weeks, and we chased it up again. And the social worker had left, and no one else was assigned. A new social worker was assigned, and this led to a child protection case and the family going into child protection. We attended this meeting remotely, and this was nearly 10 months after we, or any of the other schools, had seen the family. The children were enrolled at a new school, and we handed over our safeguarding documents 10 months later. Case 2. In similar circumstances, a family left school during lockdown in March 2021. The family went to Birmingham and were unable to find a school place. Although they remained in touch with us, we told them to appeal to Birmingham County Council and report them missing in education. We chased this up and were told that the case was closed and had been transferred to Worcestershire. Again, we had not been informed. Worcestershire and Birmingham batted this to and fro as the family lived on the border. Birmingham eventually took it on and a school place was found. Sadly, case 3. Just this week, a young family has arrived in Staffordshire. They've arrived in a school fleeing a drug cartel culture in the West Midlands. No clothes, no English, no national insurance number, and no paperwork. They have come from another school. Mum is scared to share anything. The head teacher reports being a detective, trying to find out where they are from, with safeguarding concerns and services involved already actioned. In addition to that come the complexities around accessing the curriculum. In her experiences, this will take a minimum of 6 months to unpick. These children come with no funding, no free school meals, and nobody questioning where they are. This school reports on 13% pupil premium, not bad, but in reality, it's more than double this. The school is plugging the gap emotionally, socially and financially, even before the academics are considered. Following this, our colleagues contacted a number of bodies who at each attempt passed the responsibility onto another, including the DFE and Ofsted. Findings from serious case reviews by the NSPCC report the following. Current policies do not allow the routine centralisation of sharing of basic demographic data between health and education services. The high level of mobility and significant levels of dishonesty of a mother, B and A, rendered it difficult for involved agencies to form, retain and as necessary share accurate estimates of risks. The rapidly changing locations of mother and son, still below compulsory age for school, made it possible for a chronic risk of harm to be rendered insufficiently apparent to professionals in any other agencies and location. These are just a snapshot from the NSPCC. The NSPCC report issues and serious concerns that are significant gaps in arrangements with schools and external services. What I have shared supports this. They are concerned that there is no mechanism in place which would ensure that local authorities know the whereabouts of families in instances where families move from one local authority to another, to another, to another, meaning that children may be still missing from education. What I have shared supports this. They are concerned that safeguarding response to children missing from education remains limited without central oversight. What I have shared supports this. And there is limited, comprehensive and reliable data outlining the number of children who are missing extended periods of formal full-time education. The NSPCC are advocating for a register centralised of children that are missing. And what I have shared sadly supports this. At the moment, it feels very much like the schools are left alone with the responsibility for tracking down these families. Not only is it a huge drain on the internal resources, but more importantly, precious time lapsing where a child could come to serious harm. Head teachers and school staff are going above and beyond to support these vulnerable children who are hidden in our system. This, I am aware from my investigations, is not a county issue, but a national tragedy with inevitable severe consequences if the DFE do not act quickly. Colleagues, We need NHT fully behind this to keep all vulnerable children safe, not just the disadvantaged who are documented, but the missing and hidden who are lost to our system currently. Mr. President, colleagues, I move.
And we have Paul, who's going to speak at the 2-minute mic.
Hello, Paul Gosling, Devon Branch. I'm sure we've all got... Put your hands up if you've heard stories like that in your school and community. Yeah. And we've got the Secretary of State coming along later to talk about problems of attendance. Those children are often, aren't they, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 10 weeks on our books, missing attendance in school. And there's, you know, Emily's highlighted there what needs to be done, joined up thinking, and people being held responsible to make sure those children have an eye on them for safeguarding reasons, and also because they are missing education. So I fully support this motion. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the motion? Yes, somebody's coming up. That's great. Come up to mic 2, no rush. Thank you.
I do support the motion, but I don't think that this is solely about education, and we talk a lot, and our job is children's services and education, but it's also about adult services. I have far fewer problems in terms of children's social services than I do in terms of adult social services. And yes, I have met dishonest parents, but usually because they're fearful and they're scared. And if you've experienced trauma and violence, or you've fled either a violent person or a difficult country, and then you come somewhere, and as you say, the social worker changes. You've got this, you're sent to this refuge, you're sent to that place, and all the time you're being expected to share really personal and, you know, sometimes shameful to you and embarrassing information with all God knows who. So I think there's also a thing about adult services. And when I look at my parents and some of the ones who've been the very most dishonest to me, and they've caused me hours and hours and hours of work, actually they're just fearful, really decent people who haven't had the good life that I've had. So I think we have to look at adult services as well.
We're in a position where we can move to the vote. For those in favour, would you please show? Thank you. And those against, please show. Thank you. That is unanimously carried. Moving now to motion number 18. This is standing in the name of the London region and the South East region. It's to do with the National Framework of Accountability for LADOs. It's the top of page 41 in your brochure. And Patrick, are you proposing? Thank you. You don't look like those names on my list. So, welcome, Patrick.
Hi. Brothers and sisters, I think that's what I'm meant to say. So I'm just, there we go. Earlier at the officials' conference, we had a discussion about the somewhat confusing and opaque new advice in keeping children safe in education on low-level concerns. This is an example of opacity, leaving the possibility of children being left at risk of harm. For children to be kept safe, it's important that processes and protocols are clear and consistent, and where this is not the case, safety is put at risk. That there is no consistent and clear national framework for the work of LADOs is a lacunae in safeguarding practice. This also puts our members as DSLs and as school leaders at risk due to the sometimes apparently capricious actions of LADOs acting without a clear framework. It is clear that without a national framework of processes and protocols, that there is a serious discrepancies in the behaviour of LADOs, resulting in postcode lottery of behaviours with similar issues being treated very differently in neighbouring local authorities, and with timescales for investigations and actions varying radically. This means that children are left unsafe and that colleagues are at risk of being left uncertain about outcomes and actions both as DSLs and, if unfortunately they find themselves subject to allegations and investigation. Regional officers around the country report the uncertainty of approach by LADOs as a key difficulty in their work. This motion calls on the NEC to campaign for a national framework properly consulted on of accountability for the role of LADOs to address this lacunae and to ensure the safety of children.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And just seeing, do we have anyone who wishes to speak? No. Let's move to the vote then. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's great. Is it Gail? Gail, you're welcome. Please come up.
Gail Larkin, Surrey branch. I support this motion and I've seconded it because I've got 3 current cases that I'm dealing with in Surrey where head teachers have been suspended because of the actions of the Lado in Surrey, who, if I said incompetent, that would be underestimating how she actually behaves. Her first port of call is to go back, say it hasn't met the threshold, but go back to the Chair of Governors and say, but suspend the member while we investigate. On one of my cases, the member has been suspended for 18 months. Yeah, and she has now been reinstated back to her school, although I think she's going to find it very difficult to go back. So I think we do have to have this framework for LADO so that it's consistent right across the country. So I second the motion.
Go. We have 2 more speakers. Please go. We've got Mike either side. Please go. It's great to have people coming up to speak. Let's start. Dave, we'll start with you, and then Anne will take you next. Thank you, Dave.
Dave Woods, London Region, Ealing Branch. In support of this motion, I also think we need to include not just the accountability framework, but something about ongoing regular training. All of us who do the role as a DSL or an assistant DSL, we have to update our training regularly. So that's something that should be in the framework. And the other question also is about the appointment of LADOs. How are they appointed? Who appoints them? Because it's another grey area. No one actually really seems to know. And if it's like the LADO in my area, sometimes they're just missing in action and you can't actually find them. And so I think, yes, we need to support the motion, but definitely also with the regular updated training in the same way that anyone doing a DSL role does as well. Thank you.
Mr. President, colleagues, my last conversation with a LADO was a very positive experience, and it was before the most recent update of keeping children safe in education, where we worked with the LADO, possibly with something that didn't meet the threshold, but we had the most amazing support and came to a positive conclusion and outcome. It's really important, particularly with the new guidance for keeping children safe, that we do have this support, that we do have accurate, fair decisions that are made so that we are doing the right thing for often our most vulnerable children. It's so important. Our members are going to be left very vulnerable if we don't have, as Dave has said, regular training, that we don't have those conversations and that we don't get those outcomes for those young people that we serve and the schools that they're in. Thank you.
Next speaker at mic 2, please.
Good morning. I'm Sue Thackeray from the East Riding of Yorkshire. I'm sitting here just having very recently retired, listening to what's being said. And in East Riding, we've always had an excellent LADO. He retired springtime sometime. The post has just been advertised at £32,000. And we were just saying, you're not going to get the quality of LADO compared to what we had for that salary. I had an excellent assistant head who would have made the best LADO imaginable, but she can't afford to take that salary cut. So that's the issue we're in. We're in an issue where people aren't being paid properly for the positions that they're expected to take. when we're talking about starting NQTs at 30,000 and yet the responsibility of the ladder at 32, it just doesn't add up. Thank you.
Morning all, newbie here. Nice to see you. NQT at conference, here we go. Clive Leach from the newly reinvigorated Worcestershire branch. I have been... Thank you, that's very kind. And most unexpected, but carry on. Worcestershire, in its wisdom, in inverted commas, has changed the way that a laddo is assigned. We used to have two guys who were absolutely, totally committed to the role and knew what they were doing because they knew what was happening in schools. Now it is a magic sort of musical chairs arrangement where a social worker is assigned to carry out a case. And the last one I went through ended up with a position of trust meeting where I was on trial by an individual who was asking questions that no one who would, even if they were an NQT, would ask a school leader. 34 years in education, to be patronised by somebody who has absolutely no idea what the child is going through, how to deal with a difficult parent, or to understand the anxiety of my colleagues who were put at risk. No advice because there was no experience. I fully support this motion for those very reasons. A national standard, just like those of us who are safeguarding children and our colleagues in schools go through. Colleagues, I fully support this motion, to your surprise.
It's great to have people coming up from the floor. It's great to have debate. Thank you for encourage that as we go forward the rest of the day. Right, I think we're ready to proceed to the vote. So, for those in favour, please would you show? Thank you very much. And for those against, unanimously carried. Thank you. Okay, we now move to motion number 19. This deals with safeguarding online. It's in the name of the North West region. It's on page 41. The proposer is Jim Nicholson. Seconder Amanda Hume. Welcome, Jim.
Morning again, conference. I've no jokes for this because actually it's a bit of a sombre moment. This motion came about after a few conversations with colleagues, and when you unpick it, this particular topic, it just seems to grow and become ever more complex. A colleague yesterday, keep this into your minds while I'm talking, from Ireland, talked about us as being Priawidja, the term from Ireland being chief carer. What an amazing term. Thanks for that, Graham, because with that term in my head is now how I speak. One of the most challenging, spine-chilling moments any member of a school will ever experience is that moment when a young person takes that deep breath and then trusts us with information regarding a form of abuse that they've experienced. This aspect of our work has always existed, but now the means by which it manifests itself have become ever more complex. Our young people now have access to devices that can expose them to explicit sexual material, graphic violence, trauma, exploitation, abuse, manipulation, offensive racist language, and the list is extensive. This access is in the quiet of their bedrooms. It's on their friendship platforms. The term friend has changed, and they carry it in their back pockets. Yes, this technology has the power to inform and inspire, but it also has the power to destroy. How many of us know of children under the age of 11 who have access to 18-plus material through technology? It's estimated now that 86% of 8 to 11-year-olds have a smart mobile phone. 97% of young people between the age of 12 and 15. A pause for thought. What does this really mean for our children? We asked school leaders in the North West what their experience had been in the last 12 months. 30% reported children accessing explicit pornographic material. 25% reported cases of children being groomed. 75% reported children gaming using multiplayer platforms with people unknown to them beyond their friendship group. 95% of children accessing apps, online, films and games inappropriate for their age. 88% of children using social media apps, resulting in a negative impact upon their well-being. These are stark statistics. Our young people have been given Pandora's box with which to play, and their natural curiosity takes them down roads that no child should ever find themselves. To combat this, schools try to develop lessons and schemes of work. We use resources such as Think You Know, yet still we see rapid change and impact upon our children. We put on training sessions for our communities in the hope that will help. But all too often, schools report low attendance. And when things go wrong, the safeguarding hubs and services, including the police, are so thinly stretched that they cannot act quickly. We have a public health crisis, colleagues, in our children due to increased access to internet-based technologies. This cannot be the responsibility of just schools. As we know, safeguarding is the responsibility of everyone. In order to address this, there's increasing risks associated with internet-based technologies. We must create a multi-agency proactive response and a universal programme to support parents and schools consistently and strategically. We must develop a programme that will educate and support our communities on a national scale and create a support infrastructure for parents, carers, teachers and other professionals linked through children's services. We must ensure that government insists on the safeguarding legislation for technology providers that enables prosecution when companies fail to meet the standard identified in their charter. And we must change the social status quo so that inappropriate online activity becomes completely unacceptable to parents, carers and children. For example, children having access to film and social media beyond their age. We must create, therefore, a national strategy that will reduce the number of cases of child exploitation and trauma related to internet use and misuse. Conference, I move.
Thank you, Jim. I see nobody... Oh, yes, I've got a few people. Simon, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim. That's really important, and I think it's amazing, isn't it, what our children have got in their pockets and what they can do with them. But I think what I just want to make comment on is the fact that the government seems to keep revisiting this notion of banning mobile phones in schools, and it keeps coming up again and again. The recent Teacher Tap survey says there's 100% of schools have restrictions when they are allowed on the premises. And I like having mobile phones that our Year 6 bring to school, because they give them into the office, and they're locked away, but their parents like it because they can see where they are when they're going home. But I also like it as a school leader because I can nip those issues in the bud. So if there's been some WhatsApp messaging between the Year 6 WhatsApp group where there's been some unkind behaviour, I can do that and I can coach them about how to use them because the technology is not going away. And I think the narrative of saying let's ban them is completely futile.
Thank you, Simon. Anyone else wishing to speak? In that case, we will move to the vote. Those in favour, please would you show? Thank you. And those against? Unanimously carried. Thank you. Okay, we now move to motion number 20. This is to do with the pay of school business leaders, and it is standing in the name of the School Business Leaders Council. It's page number 41 of your brochure. Proposer. Good morning, Rachel. Rachel to propose, and Dimela to second.
Morning, everyone. I'm Rachel Younger. I'm branch secretary in Blackpool and chair of our School Business Leaders Sector Council. Sisters, brothers, those of you who have been attending conference for a number of years will have heard me and other school business leaders present motions on this subject before. But I make no apology for speaking about it again. For many of our school business leader members, this is still a major issue, and they need their trade union, our trade union, to continue fighting about this. In a single school setting, SBLs deputise parts of the head teacher's role in the same way as other members of the senior leadership team. In a multi-academy trust setting, they deputise parts of the chief executive officer's role in posts such as chief operating officer. It should, therefore, be straightforward to pay SBLs a salary which is in line with other senior leaders who are part of the same team, and in keeping with the level of accountability and responsibility of their roles. Sadly, the reality for many of our SBL members shows that this is not straightforward at all. Despite our best efforts year after year to convince government that SBLs need to be part of the same salary structure as other school leaders, nothing has changed. They seem to have put it in the too hard to do box. Or maybe the can't be bothered box. Our SBL Sector Council believes that we should continue to make our case with government, but is also asking that we make use of other avenues to get to where we need to be. I have heard many of you in this room and other NEHT colleagues talk about the vital role that SBLs carry out in your schools and trusts. I know that you understand their value. Please support this motion and show all our SBL members that NEHT can be bothered. Thank you.
Morning, conference. Andy Mellor, Blackpool Branch President and SBL Sector Council member. I stand before you as someone who has come through to school leadership through the classroom route and benefited from the leadership pay scale. But for too long, our SBL pay has been the Cinderella of leadership pay, and it's not good enough. SBL roles, leadership roles, being advertised at £20,000 per annum, less than an NQT, and they're still out there, those adverts. That's an insult to our members. And our SBL members are just as important to the NEHT as any other member of the NEHT. We wouldn't advertise deputy head teacher and assistant head teacher roles at £20,000 per annum. So why, with their unique leadership skills, should SBLs be paid less than those leaders in similar leadership roles? It's time to pay our SBLs as the valued school leaders they are. I urge you to support this motion and secure our members the pay that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. See no one else. Oh, yes, sorry. Jim, come up. Thank you.
Jim Nicholson Branch. Sorry, Jim Nicholson Branch.
Freudian slip.
It was a long night last night. And an early morning. Just speaking in support of this motion. Colleagues, we do have members of NEHT in positions of authority, clearly, that can make a difference to SBLs in their schools regarding pay and fight for that. But school budgets, and the conversations that I hear as branch secretary, actually prohibit it, stop it, cause conflict of interest for our heads to actually be speaking up for stronger salaries inside their own schools. It's not easy, but our membership needs to stand by this motion. We have to stand up for our SPLs and get what they deserve because the job is so complex, and you know it. But we still have our own members not doing enough for their own SPLs, and this is why this motion is so needed. Support this motion, colleagues.
Thank you, Jim. I think we can then move to the vote. For those in favour, would you please show? Thank you. Those against? And that is unanimously carried. Thank you. Right, moving then on to motion number 21. This is to do, subject close to my heart, public service pay. And it's standing in the name of the, let me just double check this, is the assessment group. Essex branch, I apologise, Essex branch. So Alan, you're going to propose, second by Eureka. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you. Good. I have never met anybody in a school who is not embarrassed to talk about their pay. And I don't imagine there are many NHT members who would feel comfortable taking industrial action about their pay. But something has to change. According to a former fireplace salesman, we have shown extraordinary dedication during the pandemic. Well, breaking news, Gav, we always have. He even went so far as to say they have shown extraordinary dedication and flexibility in adapting to different ways of working while continuing to provide high-quality education for all pupils during this uniquely difficult period. And then what did he do? He backed up those kind words by directing the independent STRB to freeze our pay. What a lovely Christmas present that was. Our dedication, as always, has been taken for granted. We've kept our schools open through the holidays. We've plugged the gaps or lack of reach in other children's services. School leaders have remained on call throughout holidays and weekends. The STRB actually want to sort our pay out. The NGA want to sort our pay out. And it is in this government's best interest to sort our pay out. It's not a question of not being able to afford it. They can't afford not to. Our school leaders are exhausted, and early retirement for many is looking an attractive option. And the next generation of leaders are looking on ruefully, wondering whether headship and senior leadership should remain their ambition. And graduates are seeing other career paths as more attractive and better rewarded. We do not need to be and should not be embarrassed talking about our pay. And we can quote the NGA. The NGA stated it is difficult to understand how imposing a public sector pay freeze on teachers can be justified. We can quote the STRB. Their 31st report urged that they be allowed to fully exercise their role in making recommendations on pay uplifts for all teachers and school leaders for 22-23 based on the evidence. Going on to say they support a review of the existing leadership pay framework, including the factors determining pay for school leaders, the issue of pay differentials between the teacher and leadership pay ranges, and the leadership roles covered by the pay structure. So let's build a campaign on those words so that the STRB gets its teeth back. Now, colleagues, I'm proud to be a leader who has supported and guided my school community through the pandemic. You can read all about it in my book. Still got copies. Ours is not the only public service that has shown extraordinary dedication over the past 18 months. We have looked after and educated their children whilst many have worked on the front line. And yet we have seen many of those families struggle financially despite being in work doing essential jobs. And we have seen for ourselves the impact on children and young people. And we know the links between poverty and crime for our young people. Don't take my word for it. These are the words of retiring Merseyside Police Commissioner Andy Cook, who said, "The best crime prevention is increased opportunity and reduced poverty." Theresa May wants to talk to the burning injustices suffered by working families, the jams just about managing. Well, there are many more jams than ever, and actually many of them are not even just about managing anymore. May insisted work is the best route out of poverty, but about 60% of British people in poverty now live in households where someone is in work. Keeping the jam family finances in good condition increasingly requires the salaries of 2 working parents, and yet for many, the good quality, affordable childcare remains out of reach. As school leaders, we are key figures in our communities. We may feel uncomfortable to stand up and demanding pay recognition for ourselves, but we can stand up alongside other unions and campaign for fair pay for all public sector workers, to lift many out of poverty, others to be able to manage independently, and everybody, including us, to be rewarded for our extraordinary dedication. Conference, support this motion, then go back to your schools and lead your communities in a public service pay campaign. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Michelle, you're for the next motion. Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak at either of the mics? No. In that case, let us move to the vote. If you are in favour, would you please show? Thank you. And those against? That's relief. Right. The motion is unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we now go on to motion 22A, which is a lead motion, and there are also two lettered motions which we will come to afterwards. The lead motion is in relation to SATS. It's standing in the name of the West Midlands region, and Michelle is here to propose.
Thank you. I seem to be doing this motion every year for some reason, but hopefully people will listen. Last year, our then Secretary of State made a very welcome statement, as noted in Schools Week. I quote, "SATS will be cancelled this year following the decision to partially close schools," the Education Secretary has said. Gavin Williamson said that the government recognised that primary tests will be an additional burden on schools. A sensible decision, given the circumstances that still exist today. How many of our schools have been unaffected by COVID this term? Very few, I would think. In May 2020, the Schools Minister told the Education Select Committee that SATs were not qualifications for young people, that they were a form of accountability for the school system. Therefore, as the reason for statutory primary assessment is for accountability purposes, surely the reason SATs were cancelled last year still applies. Our current Year 6 children all had hugely different experiences during the previous school year, and the differences continue today. Last year I proposed a motion asking for SATs to be cancelled. I asked how we could have standard attainment tests when nothing about the experiences of different school settings was in fact standard. This continues to be the case. If data from the SATs is being used to compare schools, it is desperately unfair. The SATs, quite simply, are not fit to be used for accountability purposes. If, as the Minister for Schools said, this is their only purpose, then why would we be wasting time administering costly and pointless tests? The same applies to other statutory primary assessments. We've already seen the introduction of Baseline, which has taken our reception teachers away from their classes during the vital settling in period to administer the test to individual children. Using this test for accountability purposes is definitely questionable. Question. Mum bought bananas and some flowers.
Oh, it's confidential. This is a brilliant question.
Thank you, Jackie. Please carry on.
Okay, that's all right. She gave Sam a banana. Sam ate the banana. Sam's mum bought bananas. What else did she buy? Child number 1, wine. Child number 2, moisturiser. Child number 3, octopus. I would virtually guarantee that on a different day, these children would give completely different answers. If baseline assessment as it exists is used to measure progress, I look forward to these children being in Year 6. I would imagine our progress measures will be very high indeed. It is too late to cancel baseline assessment this academic year, but we really must question its effectiveness as an accountability measure. We've heard a great deal about the terrible gaps that exist in our children's education as a result of COVID. We've been given recovery funding to help them catch up. But what do we mean by recovery? Do we mean a true recovery of our education system as a result of reflection on our current practice? Or do we mean narrowing our curriculum and putting the children through intensive tutoring sessions so that they can perform well in tests in 1 week next May? The absence of SATs for the previous 2 years has not had any adverse effects. On the contrary, children and teachers have been relaxed and able to personalise learning so that children could progress as quickly as possible in an atmosphere free from pressure and conducive to their well-being. If, due to the pandemic, these tests cannot be used for their only purpose, accountability, then they are pointless. COVID has made us stop and reflect on many practices, and many changes for the better have been made in our everyday lives as a result of these reflections. We need to cancel statutory assessments in primary school next year and use this time to reflect on how we can improve primary assessment in the future. Conference, I urge you to support this motion. Thank
you, Michelle, and welcome Emily to speak.
Emily Prophet, Staffordshire branch. I fully support this motion. In Stafford at the moment, we see the highest levels of COVID reoccurring across the country, and all of our schools are back into full measures that we saw pre-September. How on earth can our children be expected to be put through these ridiculous assessments and milestones when we are back to the measures that we saw last year? SATs have to be reviewed this year. They have to be looked at, and the significance of them moving forward and the purpose of them just needs to be completely reviewed. It's not effective, it's not right for our children, and we need to look at this seriously. Thank you, Conference.
Before we take any further speakers on the lead motion, we do have 2 lettered motions, so I need to give the proposer and seconders an opportunity, if they wish, to speak, and then we'll take other speakers. So 22B is to do with primary statutory assessment, North Eastern region. If either Deborah or Shannon wishes to speak, please come forward. And then lettered motion 22C, primary post-assessment, NEHT Northern Ireland. Graham or Carmen wish to speak, please come forward. In which case then I would invite anyone else who wishes to speak. We're going back to the lead motion now. Please come forward. Thank you. Mic number 2.
Tim Newbold, Branch Secretary of Wrexham in Wales. I moved from headship in England to headship in Wales in 2008, and some years before that, SATs had been abolished in Wales. And you know what? Welsh children are still literate, numerate, and I'm finding now children who were in school, my school, when I started being ahead, they are, in many families, the first children in their family ever to go to university. So we don't need SATs, and all your Welsh colleagues will be supporting this motion.
Hi colleagues, Keith Wright, North West Branch region, Lancashire Branch, and recent National Executive Member. I was one of the people that took great pride in boycotting the SATs in 2010 in Norfolk. Didn't do them any harm. I know some years ago it was in the press that they'd gone through GCSEs. I don't think they suffered. I don't think the secondary schools minded them not doing them. I employed a couple of my part-time teachers to do a few extra hours, see if we can use the recovery fund, but unfortunately, with an outbreak in my school, they've had to cover classes and absences. So my children across the year group, particularly year 1, have been in, they've been out. We've got a baseline assessment that we've got 2 general elections before we see the fruit of it, I'm sure. And the way I see it is this: my children have been in, out, sometimes shaking it all about with high temperatures. They haven't quite done the hokey-cokey, but I'll tell you what, I'm turning around because that's what it's all about. We don't need the SATs. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was great. Mind you, how can anybody follow that? That's the only problem. What will we do? Marvellous. Go on, Marika. Which song are you going to come out with?
I'll be very brief. Normally I'm here talking as a special needs practitioner, but primarily I am a secondary practitioner and a secondary head teacher. And whilst this looks like a primary issue, it is absolutely a secondary issue too. I think it's, I might not get the title right, I think it's Cathy O'Neill, Weapons of Mass Destruction, who's really, really clear about the fact that, that you would need thousands and thousands of cohorts of statistics to show that a practitioner had the effect on outcomes. So what I'm saying is that SATs at the end of a primary school education do virtually nothing for primary schools. It's not telling you anything about what you do. It's not telling you anything about your teachers. This is a real opportunity for our sector councils to work together, because the question we need to ask secondary schools is, what have you lost that those children coming through without SATs don't have? And maybe, what have you gained? What are you seeing? What's the difference? So let's just be really clear. This is just not a primary issue, and let's get our sector councils working together to understand what we, if we lost anything, and certainly what we might have gained. Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak? Would you like to come up? Thank you. No? Okay. In that case, let us move to the vote. Those in favour, would you please show? That's great. Thank you. Those against, please show. And that is unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Now we move to motion 23, which is training for lead assessors. And it's standing in the name of ARG. Amanda Hume is going to propose.
Thank you. Firstly, members of ARG are fully in support of all the motions that were presented under number 22, and I thought I'd take this time to speak rather than come to the 2-minute mic. The arguments have been eloquently voiced, and it's something we've been fighting for, many of you will know, for many, many years. The SATS campaign started when my daughter was in year 1. She's now at college, and she's 19. So, you know, we're working hard and we're trying our very best, but we do still have a very long way to go. And I think particularly motion 22B, we do need to look at our policy position. We need to look at what we need to do next to support the children and how we work as an association to move forward with that. So I'm going to concentrate on the training aspect. Following the report of the Assessment Reform Group, the NEHT's current policy position is that all those responsible for children's learning should undertake rigorous training in formative, diagnostic and summative assessment. The government should provide support and resources for the development of independently accredited training for school assessment leads. As a profession, we are all aware of the importance of the need for high quality, rigorous and accurate assessment. We are expected to be the experts in this field, and often we are. But the opportunities for training to increase confidence, knowledge and skills are limited. Interestingly, the government in the past has questioned our ability to assess accurately, but has never offered support or training to the many thousands of teachers and leaders carrying out this role on a daily basis. It is now time for the government to stop criticising and start supporting by providing funding for the development of independently accredited training for lead assessors in every school. This opportunity is afforded to all schools in Northern Ireland through the Chartered Institute of Educational Assessors and should be available for all schools in England and Wales too. The CIEA was set up to improve standards in educational assessment. They support assessors by providing specialist, high-quality training for individuals and organisations, and they provide accreditation for individuals against an assessment framework, with a clear progression route for those who meet the professional standards. The Assessment and Accountability Group has met with the CIEA on a number of occasions and sees real value in continuing to work with them to develop assessors in all schools who will provide leadership in establishing robust assessment procedures and practices. We know that ongoing high-quality assessment is at the heart of effective teaching and learning. And however experienced we are in assessing our children, we know that there is always something to learn. Working alongside the CIEA will provide us with the professional development we need to challenge the government's view once and for all. If the government truly believes that assessment is the key to success for all of our children, then a promise of adequate funding and support and resources for this training and development opportunity would surely be the obvious way forward. Mr. President, colleagues, I move.
Thank you, Amanda. I don't think we have anybody speaking to either of the mics, so let us move to the vote. For those in favour, would you please show? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. That motion is unanimously carried. Conference, we're doing well for time, so what we propose before we break for coffee and a chance to visit the exhibitors, we're going to take the emergency motion now rather than at the end of the day. I'm sure you'll agree that is a good use of time. The well-being motions, they will be at the beginning of our next debating session. We just want to give you an opportunity to read this motion, and then in a few seconds I will call the proposer. So please just take a moment to read the emergency motion regarding teachers' pay and conditions. Okay, this is standing in the name of the West Midlands region. And Amy, would you come to the mic? Thank you.
Good morning, President, and good morning, Conference. Thank you for having me. It's my first time at the NAHT Conference, so forgive my nerves. I still haven't actually led a school assembly since March 2020, so this is a big step. And on top of that, I took advantage of the hospitality last night, the gala dinner, a little bit too much, although I did get back to my room still in possession of my shoes, so I did better than some. Now, to the motion, which I was driven to write through just pure anger and disgust, really. I urge you to join our sister unions, the NEU and ASCL, and support this motion and send a clear message to the government that removing the cap to teachers' directed hours is the wrong answer to the wrong question. First and foremost, we have a duty of care to our staff. We know that our staff work many, many more hours than the 1265 directed hours. We know this because we did it when we were in class. This is also backed up by international OECD data. We know we have a recruitment and retention crisis already. We know this to have been true pre-COVID, through COVID, and post-COVID. We don't need or want our teachers to work more hours. Our teachers do not have the capacity to give more, and we cannot and should not use them to fill in the gaping holes in the government's failed tuition policy. We know our children need some catch-up learning, but we know also they are not a lost generation. They need to know, the need is not so desperate as to warrant this attack on our profession. As our own General Secretary said yesterday in his speech, we should not use our expertise and experience to make bad plans work. We need to work on a better plan that meets the needs of our children and young people. A sustainable plan that brings about lasting change, not a poorly thought out, tired and predictable idea that reeks of disrespect for our profession. By passing this motion, we send a clear message to our sisters and brothers in schools, as well as to the government, that we know that 1265 goes nowhere near the number of hours that teachers work. It tells them also that we demand proper funding and not exploitation. It shows that we want and need our teachers to stay in the profession for more than 5 years. We want and need our teachers to be mentally and physically well so that they can do their best. We won't facilitate levelling up on the cheap. And finally, and most importantly, we as school leaders and teachers ourselves recognise and value the professionalism of our staff. This unnecessary attack on the terms and conditions of our colleagues cannot be allowed to go unchallenged. President, Conference, I move.
Thank you, Amy.
In seconding this motion, I hope I have just a few seconds to say a few more things. Leaders, we know what it's like not to have a cap on our working hours. We must protect our teachers 1265. We must stand firm to an erosion of pay and conditions that our unions have long fought for. If 1265 goes, what next? PPA? Or what comes in? Weekend working? Childcare till 7 o'clock? We need passionate, energetic teachers to give passionate and energetic teaching and learning to our children. Removing 1265 will destroy this. Will destroy mental health, well-being and professionalism of our teachers. Please stop destroying. Please stop the contempt. Start rebuilding and start respecting. Conference, I second.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak, please? Michelle, thank you. Welcome.
Just very quickly to say that in the absence of adequate funding, our schools run on goodwill. And if we lose the goodwill of our teachers, we won't be able to do it.
Emily Prophet, West Midlands, Staffordshire branch. As you can see, the West Midlands are passionate about this one. Our teachers are already on their knees. COVID has proved this. They've worked above and beyond, around the clock, 24/7, and this is pure ludicrousy. We need to support this, colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take the speaker at mic 2 and then the speaker at mic 1. Jim, would you like to come forward? Thank you.
Jim Nicholson, Stockport branch. I'm going to support this motion with my entire heart. And the reason why is this, and this is going to be very, very uncomfortable to say what I'm going to say. When I sit in joint union meetings, one of the main items that comes up time and time again about our members is that they don't address 1265 hours. It comes up in nearly every single meeting. And actually, by supporting this motion, we would be saying to our sisters and brothers in the other unions that actually we really do support you on this issue, and it would give a clear message to our membership that we have to address this and support teachers across the country. Thank you.
Me again, sorry. And West Midlands, yes. I support this motion, also not just for 1265, but for all those of our colleagues who are involved in flexible learning, flexible working hours, and therefore having a part of 1265 made absolutely clear to them helps them juggle the very complex lives that some of them have. Therefore, although we're looking at 1265, I know we will also have in mind our colleagues who are working part-time or in other forms of flexible working, so that their existence, their well-being, can also be fully matched. Thank you.
Hello colleagues, Sam Offord, North West Regional Secretary. I just want to assure you that the North West are equally passionate about this and want to join with all of you. What we mustn't allow is for the government to think that they can divide and rule us on this position. You know, head teachers, oh, it would be great, you would be able to get your teachers to work more. No, and it's got to stop somewhere. You know, the utter contempt that we've been treated with during the pandemic and before, and it's just exposed the widening gaps. We've got to show with our colleagues in the other unions that we support them very much, and we are totally against this. So I support the motion. Please vote.
Two more speakers from mic 2, please.
Morning, everyone. I was just considering my North East colleagues and also the accents and the dialects and the languages that we'll have, first language, second language, third language. I work in a school with 25 languages, and this is not thank you in any.
Hello, Conference. Ian Taylor, Nottingham City. I fully support this motion. I also think that the flexibility and the availability that the tech has given to parents and teachers during COVID, we also have a duty as leaders, but also to put in policies and safeguards that prevent the 24/7 access of parents to teachers and staff too, as part of this.
Thank you, and very important point. Right, that's been great. Anybody else wishing to speak? In which case, let's go to the vote. Can I ask for those in favour to show? Thank you very much. And for those against? That's unanimously carried. And can I just say, I'm really, really pleased. Thank you so much, West Midlands Region and Amy, for bringing that emergency motion. It's made a very stimulating end to our first debating session this morning, so thank you for that. Just before we break, a couple of notices. One I gave earlier, I will repeat. Could the three people who are asking questions of the Secretary of State please meet in about 5 minutes in the Westminster suite? I think that's out the door and turn right. And also, for those of you who are involved in the private session after the Secretary of State has spoken to conference, if you're involved in that, you'll know who you are. Please stay behind briefly in this room now to run through logistics. We have about a 37-minute break. I would encourage you not only to obviously 37. Yes, I know. I'm too nice to you all. I would encourage you to not only have a cup of coffee, please do spend some time visiting the exhibitors. It really, really is important that we show interest and engage. So please, as well as a coffee, do that. Be back in here promptly for 11:30 when Sinead McGrearty will be speaking with us. Thank you. drink last night. I apologise. I'll try and do it a little bit softer. Welcome back, everyone. And we're going to begin this session with a presentation from Sinead McBrearty, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Education Support. That is the mental health and wellbeing charity for the education workforce across the UK. As you know, one of the main areas of focus for my presidential year will be the well-being of, in particular, school leaders. So when we approached Sinead to see if Education Support would agree, if you like, to be associated with us as my presidential charity for the year, I was absolutely thrilled when they agreed to do so, because it is a partnership. It's not all about the president choosing a charity and, oh, yes, please, we want to work closely together. And so I'm absolutely delighted we have the link with Education Support, and I'm really delighted that Sinead has agreed to come and talk with us today. Very briefly, a bit of information about Sinead. She began her career at KPMG before moving on to leadership roles in the not-for-profit sector. She's worked as an organisational development consultant and a lecturer, and has been a trustee at a number of charities, including Kaleidoscope Trust and Groundswell. And particularly important, she is currently a governor of a South London primary school. Sinead, we're so glad you're here. Thank you for giving of your time, not only to come here, but also to our gala dinner last night. And we really look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Tim. And now there's the obligatory mutual love-in, because, of course, we're delighted to be associated with the NAHT and delighted to be your Charity of the Year. Thank you for that. We already work quite closely with the union, and that matters to us, and it's very important. But Tim keeps reminding me that teacher wellbeing is an issue for life, not just for his presidency. So I'm going to take that forward in both hands after this year ends. So, as he said, we exist to support and improve the mental health and well-being of everyone working in education across all settings. Our roots are in the trade union movement. We were founded as part of a union providing support for teachers, but provided by teachers. And that's in the DNA of the organisation. 144 years later, we're still doing the same work on well-being, though the topics have changed very slightly. Instead of tuberculosis, we now have COVID. Instead of nervous breakdown, we talk about mental health. And instead of financial destitution, we support people with financial destitution. So maybe not everything has changed. In terms of services, we do loads of stuff, and my colleagues are out in the hall, so I'll let them talk to you more about counselling, peer support, and some of the research work that we do and trying to lobby on the policy side. But I guess one of the things I wanted to say was, you know, my job is well-being. That's what I spend every day working on, and specifically the well-being of people working in the education sector. And I see a lot of physical and mental health issues, you can imagine, because I know you see them too. But when I look around the sector, what I notice is the astonishing level of strength and commitment and resilience. You have all played a blinder through pandemic, dealing with very well documented chaos. There's undoubtedly tiredness, and believe me, I'm not trying to deny that in any way, and burnout across the nations. But most teachers and most leaders in most places still love their work. They still feel well, and they still feel able to do their best for children and young people. And when you're in my business, which is quite focused on the miserable end of the spectrum, that's really important to remember. Our research tells us that this well-being that does exist, not uniformly, but significantly in the sector, is underpinned by collegiality, by the relationships that you have, the connections, but also by your moral sense of purpose. These are the qualities that enable you and your members to care, to find and deliver food for hungry children, to notice and care and follow up when children go off radar, as Emily was talking about earlier, to engage in distressing domestic or online situations, and to help children feel safe, to behave in all the ways that you do that make you so worthy of the tremendous trust that the general public places in you. Far more than charity chief executives like me, far more than politicians, far more than newspaper journalists. They trust you. And of course, learning is the meat and drink of what you do. But quietly, in the background, so much of the difference that you and your members make comes down to care. And that has been understood by far more people in the last couple of years than I think ever before. I was out with some friends earlier in the week, and they asked me about my plans, and I said, I'm going to this conference on Saturday. There was a general eye roll. God, you're going to be stuck in a trade union conference. How tedious will that be? And I stood at the back, and I eavesdropped on your motions. And what I heard was moving. It was full of care, full of compassion, full of concern for everybody else, for your staff, for your pupils, for your families, for the people that nobody else cares about. But I'm here to remind you that care should not be a one-way street. If it is, it'll take you down the road to burnout. We all intellectually understand that we should look after ourselves, but in practice, too many school leaders don't prioritize their own well-being. They tell me there isn't time. And when you talk with passion about 1265 and about teacher hours, I stand with you. But I also have in the back of my head school leaders and their hours. The World Health Organization said earlier this year that working 55 hours or more per week is a serious health hazard. It's associated with a 35% higher risk of stroke. It's also associated with a 17% higher risk of death by heart disease. I tell you this because through our helplines, through our peer support groups, through our work with school leaders up and down the land, we've noticed a higher rate of heart-related conditions across the last 18 months. So if you do nothing else after listening to me, can you please go and get your blood pressure checked? Even if you're a young slip of a thing in your 40s, it can still be at a point where it's causing heart damage, and heart damage is largely irreversible. So please, attend to yourself in those very basic ways, and don't imagine it's going to be something that crops up when you're 70, because that's not how it works. You can tell with these themes I'm the light warm-up act for the Secretary of State. Self-care isn't fluffy nonsense. It's the essential requirement for staying well. Becoming unwell, physically or mentally, takes far more time to sort out than putting a little bit of routine self-care into your schedule every week ever will do. Being devoted to the job can be exactly what prevents you from being able to do the job. And we've all seen what happens when the devotion tips into exhaustion. Good mental health requires rest and recovery. There is still a major impact from COVID, most definitely. But the acute phase of this pandemic is over. We need to now establish new norms and not continue the high-intensity modes of working that have become so normal for so many in the past 20 months. Remember what the WHO said. We must address this. We must do things differently. Being a good professional, a good parent, a good partner means attending to your own needs first. That doesn't always come naturally to those of us who grew up in the last millennium. We sometimes struggle with the modern language of privileging the self. I do. Maybe it's just me. Maybe that's my Irish Catholic background. Looking after yourself means choosing to put yourself first. And this would be better if I had more hair to flick. But as L'Oreal says, because you're worth it. I can get frustrated. I can get very frustrated with the current policy environment. And I work every day to try and improve it in little quiet ways because I'm apolitical. That's my professional role. Ruth, you're not allowed to snigger. I can wait for government policy to change, But I don't think that's how revolutions work. Big change takes years, but everyone in this room can make small changes. Even those of us who aren't doing a bad job at the well-being thing, we can all make small changes. And in that, each one of us has the power to improve the well-being of our colleagues, our families, and ourselves. It starts with us, each one of us. The last time our year sixes had a normal school year, they were in year 3. The last time our year 3s had a normal school year, they were in reception. The best contribution that we can make to national recovery is to look after the people who look after the kids, and that starts with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Sinead, for those words of advice, inspiration and encouragement. I first heard Sinead speak, it was online, it was during the pandemic. I think it might have been the London region. You had a wellbeing conference and shared with the Eastern London and Eastern. And I was absolutely hooked. The one line you said, and you almost said it today, but it was one sometimes somebody says something and it absolutely hits home to you. You said the line, for school leaders, self-care is not self-indulgence. And I have never forgotten that. At every meeting I go to, I'm afraid I unashamedly say it now. And they think, well, that's a good line that Tim's come up with. It's completely untrue. It was all your credit. But it really hit home to me, the point about if we as school leaders don't look after ourselves, then how can we possibly lead our schools effectively? And the importance of our well-being and, of course, the well-being of our families and those who are dear to us. So it really, really challenged me when I was going through, as we all were, a very pressurised time leading the school during the pandemic. And that's why I'm absolutely determined that, above all else, I will seek, with the complete support of NEHT, to make the focus of the mental and emotional well-being of school leaders an absolute priority this year. And I actually think for those studying for MPQH and middle leadership courses, there has to be a much greater emphasis on the well-being. It's a message we need to get when people are both considering going into leadership and in their early stages of their career, if they're to do the job for the long haul and to look after themselves. The message you gave today, Sinead, was so, so important. And I do apologise, you are not the warm-up act for the Secretary of State. You're far more important, to my mind, than the Secretary of State. Thank you. Please don't. I shouldn't have said that. That was okay. Well, that's the end of my presidential career. I'd like to now hand over to Paul Gosling, who will be chairing 6 months early. And on that note, can we say thank you again to Sinead? What a shame we got the press in the room and it's being live streamed. Otherwise, I might just have got away with it. There we go. I think I am still in a job, in which case we're going to move on now to our next motions, which very appropriately are to do with well-being. We're going to take motions for about approximately the next 40 minutes. Then at 12:25, please stay in the hall. There won't be a break, but we'll just have a kind of a natural break whilst the Secretary of State, wonderful man, whilst the Secretary of State comes. Okay, I'm making it worse now, aren't I? I should stop. Whilst the Secretary of State comes in. So, quickly moving on to lead motion 24A. This is very appropriately related to school leader well-being. There are also two lettered motions. That's one lettered motion, 24B, the workload of school leaders. But for the school leader well-being motion, this is in the name of the South East region, and the proposer is Hildy Mitchell, seconder Gail Clark. So, Hildy, if you'd like to come forward, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, conference. I'm in a head teacher book club, probably like some of you, and our current book is Brené Brown's Daring Greatly, about how vulnerability is a core leadership attribute. So even though I'm a first-time speaker at conference and I'm really nervous, I'm about to make things worse for myself by being a bit vulnerable here, but it's all in a good cause, I hope. At our most recent NAHT branch meeting, I shared with my colleagues that I had been off work ill with stress and burnout. I wasn't one of the ones that Sinead was talking about who was coping. After 18 months of working in crisis mode, I was physically, mentally and emotionally exhausted. I couldn't see any way to get myself to work, and I knew that even if I did, I would probably be making some really bad decisions. I had actually already begun planning my liberation from school leadership meticulously. I'd trained as an open water swimming coach and was actively looking for my escape route. It really couldn't come quick enough at that moment. And I wasn't alone. My Twitter feed, my voicemail, my inbox were full of school leaders struggling. I was worried for them personally, but also for the schools that they were leading. Since the full reopening of schools, everyone and their mother has expressed a concern about mental health in schools. In January 2021, Young Minds published research showing that 2/3 of children think COVID-19 has had a long-term impact on their mental health. But there's less information and certainly less public concern about the impact on school staff and school leaders. The ESRC are currently funding research at the University of Sussex, which looks at the emotional well-being of teaching staff, but it's not finished yet. It's still very much in process. And we do already know, thanks to researchers from Nottingham and Oxford and the NHT and ASCL, that 2/3 of school leaders were not thriving during the pandemic. And the education support charity we've just heard from found that over half of school staff reported a decline in their mental health during the pandemic. And we all personally know stories of school business managers logging into Edenred in the wee small hours of the morning for their vouchers, and of heads with tape measures measuring distances between desks on Sunday mornings. But this pressure isn't new. In 2017, an NFER report found that head teacher retention rates had fallen since 2012. They recommended clarifying the career pathways of head teachers, providing more guidance to head teachers and to those that hold them to account and support them, and providing more practical and emotional support. And the report also suggested a need to explore evolving models of leadership and whether the retention strategies being used worked. It is timely, then, that as other professionals and workers combine their return to in-person working with exploration of more flexible models, our union places school leader wellbeing firmly in the spotlight. While school leaders grapple with the strategic use of the various catch-up premiums and the accountability frameworks attached to them, train school mental health leads and manage continuing assessment uncertainty, the NAHT needs to grasp this moment to campaign for real and effective support for school leaders. There is public perception that during the pandemic, teachers did nothing. Everyone in this room knows that's not true. We did exceptional things, and we did it at huge personal cost. As a union, we need to do everything we can to support our school leaders' well-being, and that's why I'm proposing this motion. We need to, for once, make sure that as a profession, we put our own oxygen masks on first. And for me, I've been really lucky. After positive support from my governors and my leadership team, finding a new head teacher coach, I'm feeling really great, actually. And I'm going to be bringing all that learning that I've got from my swim coaching training back into headship to add to what I can do at school. And my post-retirement career can wait a bit longer. The channel swim I'm really passionate about doing, I'm going to do alongside what I'm passionate about doing back in school. I want that to be the case for all school leaders. Conference, I move.
indeed, Hildy. Before I take any other speakers from the floor, we do have a lettered motion. That's 24B, connected with the workload of school leaders. It's optional, but Graham, if anyone from Northern Ireland doesn't wish to, but that, just so you're aware, there is that lettered motion. So if anyone would like then to come forward, thank you, and speak on the school leader wellbeing motion 24A.
Hi, Hildy, just firstly, thank you so much for sort of sharing your story. You know, personally, it always, it really helps me to know that people such as yourself that I really admire and do a really good job share their own story of their sort of, you know, struggles in mental health. So just on behalf of everyone here, you know, if I'm allowed to do that, yes. You know, thank you for sharing that. My own family, we're quite a public sector family. My mum and dad are both nurses. I'm a head teacher. My brother's a police officer, and my sister is a social worker. So we've got... thanks. So we're quite good at comparing the different provision we all get. My sister, at a sort of similar level to me in her professional career, she gets paid overtime. I don't. She gets supervision. She gets given supervision when she's struggling. She gets support. She gets someone to speak to. I don't. She got the jab. I didn't. And a whole host of other things that people on similar levels to us get. The support they get is just not comparable. But supervision is one thing I think would be helpful to us as a profession. And I hope NHT could add that as a recommendation to any work we do.
And I see some more speakers. Please come to either one of the mics. Thank you. If one or two of you would like to go to mic number 2 over there, it just makes it a little slightly quicker. Thank you. Okay, if we take the first speaker from mic 1, please.
Hi, my name's Ros Sendoric, and I'm from Windsor and Maidenhead, part of South Central. This is not my first conference. Gail was our leader. Well, it was my first conference. But it's the first time that I really felt that I can stand up and say something that I'm passionate about. And interestingly enough, the words have just been taken out of my mouth, because this is what I was going to say. I was a head teacher for 22 years. But I've been retired for 6 years now. But what I saw in those 22 years was a vast change in the way that social services worked, so that the level 3 of social care, which used to be called Children in Need, became the responsibility of schools, not the responsibility of social workers, because they now are only working at levels 4 and 5, which is at risk and, of course, being looked after. And I saw my job becoming more and more social work, and I completely agree with our previous speaker that what I lacked, and my daughter is a psychotherapist, and she says, Mum, you need supervision, because you do carry a huge weight, and I think that's not helpful for well-being. In my area, I'm seeing a lot of my head teachers saying, I'm going to see my school through this COVID. I'm going to keep with it until they are really on a level again, and then I am going to retire. And I'm sure that there are people in this room who feel that as well. That should not be. It should be that we have been properly recognised and properly rewarded for the work we've done. And I think all the parents out there would say they really, really respect head teachers. So as a retired head teacher, I want to say carry on with what you're doing. And we are still at the very top of that list of the most admired professions.
Good morning, I'm Alistair Black from Coventry. The Coventry won this year. Hopefully there might be a few more of us next year. I've not been to conference before, but this would be the first of many. I've really enjoyed the last couple of days. So I attended an NEHT wellbeing session a few weeks ago. not thinking about myself, but thinking the course was so that I could improve the well-being of the staff at work. And I'd misread the notes. It was about head teacher well-being. I'll be honest, I used to think it was a little bit fluffy cloud, a little bit happy-clappy, and I was very sceptical. But I got home that evening and I spoke to my daughter who's just started doing her A-levels, and she said, "You'll never guess what we did in register group this morning. We did all about well-being." So we had a conversation over tea time, and there were a few relevant points that I thought I would share with her. And she shared the same points back to me. She said, "Dad, we were told that your brain velcros the negatives." And straight away I thought about the TA who mispronounced a vowel sound during an Ofsted report in 2017. I'll never forget that comment. There were lots of good things in the report, but that was the one comment that the staff took on board. She said, "You Teflon the positives, all the good stuff just washes straight off your brain." And the next day, a traffic light changed to green just as we came to a bridge, and we turned to each other and we high-fived and we celebrated the positives. Now, I've shared it with my staff at staff meetings. Don't make the last thing you do at night be the news at 10 or the BBC News. Watch something a bit different. I found myself watching two guys going fishing. You'll maybe remember Paul Whitehouse from a long time ago. He goes fishing and it's great fun. I go to bed with a smile on my face. We both talk before bedtime about 3 good things that have happened in the day. And sometimes it's just a child giving you a high five from reception, or a wee one that runs up and you're not supposed to cuddle them, but they grab your leg and you peel them off. The main thing I pointed out to staff was the guy that did the course said, "You will live longer. If you can build up a stockpile of the positives, they'll get you through the stressful ones." And to finish off, Hildy took the words out of my mouth. I noted down earlier, on a flight, they always tell you to put your own oxygen mask first before you help the other people around you. So I would support the motion, please, and I think it's a great thing that well-being is now up there. Thank you.
I'll take a speaker from mic 1 and then a speaker from mic 2.
Hello, Conference. Eleanor Warner, West Midlands. We fully support this motion. I know all the West Midlands section do. It's a very hidden issue, head teacher wellbeing. When listening to Hildy, how many people I would say 55 hours a week, part-timers. And when earlier on today we were talking about pay, and it's a real stigma to talk about pay, but how many head teachers also feel it's a real stigma to talk about their mental health? How many people would be happy to discuss if they have medication to support themselves? It's something that we need to bring out into the open. It's a huge issue amongst head teachers. I was so surprised that only 2/3 weren't thriving, because of head teachers I spoke to, pretty much 100% were barely surviving. It's so much more than just a little bit of a pain. Conference, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hasn't she got beautiful hair? I have, but it's not mine. I lost my hair through COVID. And no job is worth that. We need to support one another and bring it to the fore that actually it's incredibly difficult and sometimes it's really lonely. And to bring this to sort of a more national attention, I think, is incredibly important. Fully support.
Thank you. Speaker? Anybody speakers at mic 2? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Denise. I'm from Stoke-on-Trent, but representing Bristol branch today. I'm one of the white working class children from free school meals who doesn't feel very levelled up being in this room. I feel very, very nervous. I wanted to be a head teacher. I did my MPQH in 2012, and a year ago I did have a breakdown, or whatever you want to say, and the anxiety of going into school every day is really tough. Do I want to be a head teacher going forward? No. Do I feel levelled up? No. But this, I fully support, and I think we need to prioritise it.
Branch President, Blackpool National Executive. You know, we are a microcosm of our membership, and you've heard some of the stories, you've probably experienced some of those things. And it really concerns me. You know, I was fortunate to be part of the Accountability Commission, and that had huge public acclaim. I don't think there is a bigger issue for our members than mental health and well-being, because we tend to put ourselves second, we put our staff first, we put our children first, and it's us. As people have said, we've got to put our own oxygen masks on first. I would like to think that we could pull the expertise that we've got in this room and in our organisation together to share with all of our members. And let's get it out there, let's share it. You know, I grew up in a time when it was a machoistic thing to be a male head teacher. You know, and sharing your inner feelings, you just didn't do. We need to break all of that down. So I would suggest that we put together our own NEHT, Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission for School Leaders, and let's get it out there. Let's pool all of that and let's share it with all of our members.
Thank you. I see no more speakers, so we will move to the vote. Can I ask for those in favour to please show? Thank you very much. I even don't want to say this, but I have to. Those against? Of course not. Passed unanimously. Thank you so much. Can I just say, every single motion we're debating is important. But that one today, I am so grateful, Heidi, that you brought that to conference. Thank you to those who came and spoke with such openness and such honesty. And I think that shows the feeling that those who spoke respect you greatly for what you said. The fact you can trust the people in this room to share so openly, I think that speaks volumes, not just about us here, but about NEHT. And sitting here and just seeing the reactions on people's faces, oh my goodness, this is such an important and significant issue. So I don't want to in any way divide any other motions which are equally important, but I think that has been a very special and pivotal moment for our association. So thank you again, Heidi, and for all those who contributed. Okay, we're moving on now to motion number 25. That's to do with deputy and assistant heads. The proposer is Claire Evans, seconder Adam Robbins, and it's in the name of the deputy and assistant head sector council. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you. Hello, council. I'm Claire Evans, newbie head teacher of 5 weeks. Representing Deputy Assistant Heads Council of the NHT and also West Midlands branch. So, lovely, amazing deputy heads and assistant head teachers. They are school leaders, SENCOs, lead DSLs, ECT mentors, often risk assessment writers, parent complaint fielders, counsellors, family support workers, decision makers, and your right-hand people. And now senior mental lead health workers in schools. Where will it end? Our new Secretary of State will tell us later that mental health must be better understood and support will be provided where it is needed. Council, I urge you to vote to press the government to fully fund and retrieve a range of support services for children to enable deputy and assistant head teachers to focus on the leadership of learning, allowing children to access the support they need from trained professionals in mental health. We are not mental health workers, but we do our best.
I'm a teacher, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I'm a teacher, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I'm an LSA, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I'm a teacher, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I am an assistant head teacher, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I'm an LSP, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I'm a teacher, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I'm a school business manager, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I'm a teacher, not a mental health worker, but I try my best.
I'm a teacher, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I am a deputy head teacher, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I'm a teacher, not a mental health worker, but I do my best.
I'm a site manager, not a mental health worker, but I try my best.
I'm an HLTA, I'm not a mental health worker, but I always try my best.
I'm a teacher.
I'm an LSA. I'm a HLTA.
I'm a learning mentor.
Not a mental health worker.
Not a mental health worker.
Not a mental health worker.
But I do my best.
But I try my best.
But I do my best.
What happens when your best is not good?
I'm a H. But I do my best.
What happens when your best is not good enough?
Conference, I urge you to move.
Thank you very much, Claire. Anybody who wishes to speak? In which case, let us move to the vote. For those in favour, please show. Thank you. Those against? That is unanimously carried. Thank you. Okay, moving to motion 26, that's on page 44, who is safeguarding the safeguarding lead. This is standing in the name of the South Central Region, proposer Julie Kelly. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's one of those things where you get later and later in the motion and you think, oh, I'm getting really nervous now, and why are we so near the end? But I can see now, because it links up with everything else that's gone before. So thank you very much to other colleagues. I wanted particularly to point out the mental health problems that our own families are going through and everything at school. And Sinead said about the self-care for ourselves. But as we've seen, we can't always do that because we're too busy supporting everyone else. So we need a system that's going to support us. We had Andy Mellor recently to talk about mental health and self-care at our Hampshire branch meeting, which was online, and only the committee came because our colleagues were too busy and doing everything at school. This links with so many of the other ones we've just talked about violence and aggression against school staff, and about the LADOs, Matey, when Patrick was talking about that, and the LADO can make all the difference, and sometimes they're just not up to the job. I'd also like to say that although this is about head teachers and designated safeguarding leads and their deputies, it has a knock-on effect to our admin, who are the front staff, and also new teachers come into the profession who are completely gobsmacked by some of the situations that they're walking into. The duty of care must be picked up on protection of the DSL and deputies in particular, which also includes physical protection from attack by parents who feel threatened by investigations and referral, and also mental health support and wellbeing resources. Also, with the fear of legal repercussions, and we heard about those yesterday, such as tribunals and the hours spent preparing paperwork, which makes any referral potentially onerous. Governors, they need the training to fully understand their role and must ensure that all support is in place for their DSLs and head teachers. I've been accused of assault by a parent who lost it after a referral when my admin and officer and I were trying to guide her away from the children. This also links in with James's number 16 proposal about emergency lockdown and what do you do when a parent completely loses it. My chair of governors had to accompany me to my car as the parent was parked next to me. I had to explain the situation to Ofsted, and thank goodness that the lead was a former head teacher who handled the parents' 19 points of complaints brilliantly, as did my local authority, but I was grilled on every point. The parent had also issued 2 subject access requests and a complaint to the data protection officer re data handling. The second SAR was after the child had been removed from our register, which links with Emily's children missing in education, and it was the hours and hours that my business manager spent on doing this and is still doing, and that links with number 20, which was school business leader pay. And I'm trying to improve her pay by extending her time from 42 hours, from 42 weeks to 40 weeks, to try and give her more pay. I still had the safeguarding files because this parent was fighting county to get funding for a tutor at home. Many of these cases involved SEN issues, and again, all the services need to get on board quickly. She only dipped into her online learning when it was suitable for her, and homeschooling is exploding at the moment since COVID, and these children are very vulnerable. We need a strong partnership with all of us, with health, social services. Chris talked on the first day about putting together health and education and social care. If we don't improve all of these services together, that is when we will go down. We were very badly let down by the social worker in this particular case. And then as DSL, you get very cut off and become very vulnerable. I spent the whole of the 2020 summer holidays terrified of legal repercussions and preparing paperwork after dealing with COVID. And on top of COVID, this has led to many of our colleagues leaving the profession. We've got a lot of our South Central are not here today, someone who will be leaving at Easter. So this links up with the recruitment crisis. I'm lucky my governors have stepped up every time there's been a situation, but they need far more training for worst case scenarios, as it was a steep learning curve for them. Also, I'm in a strong authority and legal protection advice have been brilliant, but head teacher induction again needs to include worst case scenarios, as I thought I was personally liable to begin with. Counselling availability is essential. Again, my own GP gave me face-to-face sessions because he understood the situation I was in and how personally I was taking it. But without him, I would still not be in the profession. At the end of the summer holidays, I was on antidepressants, and it was only once I hit the summer holidays that I came off them. My governors did a survey, and my staff said I did not tackle stress well. We do tackle stress well because we keep coming back and we are here today. So and that's what Hildy has done as well. All of these support systems need to be fully funded and put into place before situations escalate and be available swiftly for further support for the duration of the case and for a debrief after the event when the DSL is still reeling from the complex and often traumatic nature of the events. Just a quick example before I finish. My admin officer is 72 years old. When we closed down because of COVID, she was in hospital for 10 days on oxygen. She's back. She was not traumatised by that. What she was traumatised was that we've just done the Macmillan Coffee Morning, which we haven't done for 2 years, and that's when we were accused of assault. She says she's got PTSD from that time when we had to call the police because of what had happened, not because she nearly died in hospital because of COVID. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that this scarring from these events, we have this support, and that because we fear that escalation will happen again, and that will make us think of a second time about referring in the future, will then have serious repercussions for vulnerable children. Colleagues, I move.
Thank you, Julie, so much for your speech. Speaker for mic 1. Jackie, if you could go to mic 2. Thank you. Speaker at mic 1.
You heard Denise speak earlier. I know she's comfortable with me saying this, but a story. The reality on the ground, a parent under huge stress, having a psychotic breakdown, threatened to kill my deputy, referral to social services to protect the children, 10-day assessment process, involved the police, broke her door down, decided it was okay because there was food in the cupboard. Then arriving in a buggy with a breeze block on the top of the buggy, proceeded to run at us and throw it through the nursery window. A lobby full of children, shattered glass, extreme stress, police again, nowhere to take her, to the hospital, only place, released on the street, death threats. That's just one instance. This is in vulnerable communities with vulnerable people. We don't know where to get help. People like Denise carry this. Where does the help come from? Where does the support come? Who do we talk to? There doesn't seem to be a system. This is really needed in our profession, so I fully support this motion.
Speaker at mic 2.
Hi, thank you. My name's Jackie. I'm from Peterborough, Eastern Region, very proud. We have a great history in the Eastern Region of producing national presidents. Just thought I'd get that in. Anyhow, whilst I'm not going to lament on this sad situation that a lot of people are in, I think we've all got a story. I just wanted to actually talk about education support for probably 30 seconds. And Peterborough in 2007 suffered the suicide of a head teacher, very well respected, was my head teacher when I was an NQT, which caused Peterborough City Council to invest in Headspace, run through education support. And I've been attending one of the groups on and off now for 15 years. And we meet once every half term, and people come and people go, but I'm quite a stalwart, and it gives me something to look forward to. It isn't a counselling session, it is facilitated by someone from education support, and the stories that people tell in that room, particularly men, who are my esteemed colleagues, because I've been ahead for 20 years in Peterborough, and they have spoken out. And what people are saying today is actually quite common, but I urge you, if you don't have something like that, or to encourage, it's funded by schools now, we do pay ourselves, but at the time of Jed's death, it was funded centrally. So Headspace and Sinead, and I support all these motions. Thank you.
Hello, newbie here, so be kind. I'm Julie Norman from Somerset South West. I want to really support this motion, and the reason is because as an executive head teacher in DSL, I had a parent who wasn't happy with a safeguarding decision at a case review, meaning he could no longer see his child. It wasn't my decision, however, it was the case review. However, he decided it was my fault because as an executive head teacher, I initially raised the concern. He then spent 2 years stalking me. He followed me around the supermarket. He accosted me at the till. He would stay outside school and wait for me and continually confront me. When I went to the legal team and to the safeguarding team, they said, "You're the DSL. It comes with the job." And I said, "Where's my support? Because I'm not afraid that he's going to hurt me. I'm afraid I'm going to hurt him." And they said, "There is no support." That's why, absolutely, I support this motion.
Thank you. Nikki Smith, Baines President. This is a massive issue. Previously sat on the Children's Board, it's now a Children's and Adults Board in Baines. I no longer sit because I do not believe that we safeguard children. I do not believe we're able to do that anymore because I believe the system is failing the children. DSLs, we go to training. Every 2 years, you must attend 2 days of training. On the other year, you must attend 1 day of advanced training. We go to that training. Multi-agency training. Who else in the room has to see those parents day in, day out? Who else in that room is delivering daily messages that put those parents under threat, make them feel unsafe? Watch those relationships be broken in meetings by everybody around you, and then 2 hours later, you walk into the school, you are the one handing over the child to the parent, and you are the one who has to rebuild that relationship time and time again. It is exhausting. The chances of vicarious problems are huge. We take on those problems of the children, their families, and we care about them. And that's why we do it time and again. I do not believe that the training we get is fit for purpose. It does not protect us. It does not protect our deputies. It is not right.
I see no one else wishing to speak, so we'll move to the vote. For those in favour, please show. Thank you. And for those against? That is unanimously carried. That brings us to the end of the 3 motions on wellbeing. I've been attending a conference since 2002, and I can't think of 3 successive motions. And I've sat in some fantastic conferences, but that have been so powerful and so moving. And thank you again to all of those who presented and spoken so openly. I do have a message that Sinead has asked me to pass on. She and we acknowledge that some may have found, in a way, that session difficult. And we would encourage you to seek support from the education support staff. The colleagues are there at the stand. Either have a chat with them today or contact them soon if you feel you need to. To seek help, to seek just advice, to talk an issue through. It's not a sign of weakness, as we know. It is truly a sign of strength. So if you would benefit from their service, thank you, Sinead, for asking me to mention that. We would encourage you to do so. We're now going to have just a short break. Unless you have to, please stay in the hall, because very shortly we'll be welcoming the Secretary of State for Education.